Next, we're going to look at handling exceptions and other errors. So I'm going to open up the CIS 3049 Unit 3 exceptions example on error handling. This is comes from the book from the chapter on error handling, and it just shows you a simple error condition. One of the common ones is divide by zero, so there's two text boxes that are displayed. So here are the two text boxes and a button that divides one by the other, and again, if we put in a 0 in one, we'll get error message. An exception will be raised, not just an error message. And we have a little label where we can display some information about that exception. So again, we're just grabbing the two values, dividing one by the other, and we'll get an error. So let's just try this. So when we run this, we're dividing 5 by 0, get us an exception. Pops us over here and shows us where the exception is, divide by 0 or exception here. And so if we stop this, here's what's actually displayed at on the server. One of the issues that this does raise is that if you don't catch these server errors, it actually displays part of your code. And so you want to make sure that your web pages catch these types of errors. So one of the standard ways of doing this is the try catch block. We type in try and then a bracket, and then at the end we end that bracket. So everything in this bracket will be tried out and any errors will be caught. So then we'll put in a catch and we'll grab an exception. I'm just going to paste in a block of code here. So we'll catch an exception, we'll call it error, and then again in our code here we put in a little label here in red, and so we're going to add to that label text some information, the error message and error source and a stack trace. Often you won't do that if there's a real page, but for debugging purposes we're just going to show this. And so this will not stop the program executing, it'll just catch and handle this exception gracefully. So now if we run this again, hit divide by 0. So the error message is attempt to divide by 0. This is where it's coming from, some library. And this is a stack trace. Sometimes that's helpful. It can shows you what line of your code is causing that error. We can also look at another exception here. Let me clear up this. I'm just going to do a normal division here. Okay, so in our code we also are converting these strings to numbers. And so if we actually just type in a string here and hit, we'll get a different error. Input string could not in the correct format, and it tells us why. And again, that's with this parse error. So without this try catch, we'll actually get these exceptions. So you want to try to use these try catch blocks a lot to surround your code and catch different exceptions. And again, generally we're not going to be displaying the messages there. We might be doing some validation here, we might just be ignoring them, or we might be passing them up to a different process. Now, the code does show you one other way of doing this division, and that's calling a separate routine that is actually going to check if there's a divide by 0, and it can throw its own exception, or you can just handle it as is. One of the things we often want to do is to avoid exceptions. Exceptions are generally bad. I mean, you can do this try, catch, and handle them, but when possible you want to just avoid them entirely and do things like here, check if B is 0, and if B is 0, display some alternative result, just the incorrect divisor or something like that. So in the practice problems, we'll look at catching some other exceptions and handling those. But in general, in our code, we'll just surround our code with a try block and a catch block. And one thing we can do is just put a simple message here. So I've simplified this message. It just says the actual message, error message that's raised, which is generally a relatively user-friendly error. So now when I run this and I divide by 0, it actually just tells me that. If I have an incorrect message, it'll just tell me that. So this is a nice way of processing these errors. It still handles exceptions. It still is doing it using exceptions, but it's a better attempt than not handling the exceptions at all.